The alarm went off at 5:15 every morning, but Daniel Hayes was usually already awake by 5. He had learned to lie still in those first minutes, not from peace, but from discipline. If he moved too quickly, the day began before he was ready for it, and the day always asked more of him than he had planned to give. He rose without sound, padded to the kitchen in socked feet, and started the coffee. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in a building on the west side of Portland, the kind of building where the hallway always smelled faintly of other people's cooking, and the elevator was broken half the months of the year. He had lived here for 4 years. He would probably live here for 4 more. This was not a source of bitterness for him. Or if it was, he had tucked it somewhere quiet and kept the lid on it. He poured the coffee. He checked the order log on his phone. Daniel worked for Bramble and Bloom, a flower delivery service that served most of the city's wealthier zip codes. He drove a white cargo van with the company's green leaf logo on the side. He worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 if a driver called in sick. The money was not remarkable, but it was consistent, and it was his, and he had Lily. Lily was 6 years old, and she slept with one arm thrown over her face, a habit she had inherited from her mother. She dreamed loudly not in words, but in small sounds, half-syllables. The occasional firm declaration to some invisible presence in her sleep. Daniel sometimes stood in the doorway and listened to those sounds without identifying them. It was enough to just hear her. He made her breakfast before she woke. Toast and peanut butter on weekdays. Scrambled eggs on the days he had time. He packed her bag. He laid out her clothes on the chair beside her bed, not choosing for her, just offering, because she was particular about her choices and got upset if she had to rush. He had learned this the hard way, in the first year after Emily died, when everything had been learned the hard way. Lily appeared in the kitchen at 6:40, hair flattened on one side, wearing the purple sweater she had chosen herself the night before. She climbed into her chair without speaking and began eating. "Sleep okay?" Daniel asked. "I was arguing with a turtle," she said, without looking up. "Who won?" "I did." She said it with total confidence. He smiled into his coffee cup. She was starting first grade in the fall. She asked hard questions about the sky, about money, about why certain people lived in bigger houses than others. She asked about her mother in the same tone she used for everything else, which was the most heartbreaking thing about it. Because she was too young to know she was supposed to be careful with that question. She just asked it plainly, the way you'd ask where the scissors were. "Where is Mom?" "Mom got sick." Did she know she was going to get sick? No. Did it hurt? "I don't know, sweetheart." He answered what he could. He carried what he couldn't. In the bottom of the bedroom closet, behind a pair of boots he no longer wore, sat a gray banker's box with a torn lid. He had not opened it in 14 months. It held what was left of the case he had tried to build: documents, emails printed on paper, a USB drive in a small plastic bag, 2 legal briefs filed and subsequently buried by attorneys who were very politely paid to lose. He kept the box because throwing it away felt like something he wasn't allowed to do yet. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for. He dropped Lily at school, kissed the top of her head, watched her disappear into the building, and climbed back into the van. The morning orders were routine: tulips to a craftsman in Ladd's Addition, an anniversary arrangement to a law office downtown, a standing order of white orchids to a hotel lobby on the Pearl. He drove without the radio, which people found odd, but he preferred the silence. It let him think. Or sometimes, it let him not think, which was more valuable. At 11:15, the dispatch app chimed with a new order. He looked at the address. His hand stayed on the wheel. He had been to that building before the Harrington Tower, 40 floors of glass and steel above the riverfront. He had never been above the lobby. The order was for the 41st floor. He noted the name on the account, V. Hale. He scrolled down. There was a special instruction field, which most orders left empty. This one read, "Deliver personally. No delay. Do not leave at reception." The tip listed in the app was $200. Daniel sat in the parking lot of a floral depot and stared at that number for longer than was probably reasonable. $200 was a tank and a half of gas. It was Lily's school supplies for the fall. It was 3 of the 4 bills he had coming due at the end of the month. He was going to accept the order. He called his sister first. "I need a favor," he said, when Margaret picked up. "You need to pick her up," she said, before he'd finished the sentence. She did this anticipated, pre-answered. It was both useful and slightly unsettling. "I'm already home. Bring her by whenever. It's just 1 delivery. Should be an hour, maybe less. Danny." Her voice softened, just slightly. "It's fine." She likes being here. Noah built some kind of fort situation in the living room, and they've been arguing about the structural integrity of it for 2 days. He exhaled. "I'll call you when I'm on my way back." He sat for another moment. He wasn't sure why he was hesitating. It was a delivery. He had made thousands of them. This was an expensive address with an eccentric note attached. That was all. His phone buzzed. Lily's name on the screen. He answered. "Ba?" she said. She had started calling him that sometime in the last year, not from any particular conversation, but because she had heard it somewhere and decided she liked the sound. He had never corrected her. "Hey, Bug. What's up? Mrs. Callahan said we're doing fingerprints tomorrow. Not like bad fingerprints, like art fingerprints. We make animals with our thumbs. That sounds good. Can you come home early today? Margaret's fort is kind of crooked." "I know. I'm going to be a little late tonight." "Margaret's picking you up." Silence. Then, "Okay." No protest. Just, "Okay." She had learned, somewhere along the way, to absorb small disappointments without making them bigger. He didn't know if that was strength or something sadder than strength. And it was a question he didn't let himself finish. "I'll see you before bedtime," he said. "Promise." "Okay," she said again. "Ba, come home safe." 6 years old, and she said that every time. Come home safe. Like she had already learned that people could leave and not return, and she was covering the distance between her and that fact with words. "Always," he said. He put the van in gear. Harrington Tower had a main lobby attendant and a secondary security desk positioned between the elevator bank and the stairwell. Daniel had been to enough high-end buildings to know how to move through them without friction. Show the badge. Hold the arrangement gently. Don't look like you're memorizing anything. The attendant at the desk, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with the practiced neutrality of a career professional, scanned his ID with unusual thoroughness. He compared the photo to Daniel's face twice. He made a call on the desk phone, speaking too quietly to be heard clearly. He waited. He nodded. 41st floor, he said. "Miss Hale's office suite. Take the east elevator." Daniel rode up alone. The arrangement was an unusual one. A tall cylinder vase holding a structured display of deep burgundy peonies, white ranunculus, and branches of dark eucalyptus. It was the kind of piece that cost money not because of the flowers themselves, but because of the deliberate restraint in how they were arranged. Nothing excess. Nothing soft. He had been doing this job long enough to read something in a floral order, and this one read, "I have taste, and I know how to use it as a statement." The elevator opened onto a small anteroom, frosted glass walls on either side, a reception desk, unmanned. Through the frosted glass to the right, he could make out the shapes of furniture, a long table, chairs, the geometry of a conference setup. The main door at the end of the anteroom opened. A woman stepped through. She was perhaps 45, though she moved with the contained authority of someone who had long since stopped letting age become a conversation. Her hair was dark, cut precisely to the jaw. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white shirt. No visible jewelry, except for a small watch on her left wrist. She was reading something on a phone as she stepped out, and she didn't look up for the first 2 seconds. Then she did. Her eyes went to the arrangement first professionally, assessing. Then to him. Daniel Hayes looked at her face, the lobby of a building he used to visit for an entirely different reason. A conference room with glass walls. Not so different from this anteroom. A table where he had sat waiting for Emily, who had called him in a panic, not crying. Emily didn't cry in public, but her voice was stripped of something. A woman at the head of that table. Documents being moved. Emily's hands flat on the table in front of her, and then people he didn't know walking his wife out of a room while she looked back at him with an expression he had never been able to fully name, not fear, not shame, something between the two that had no clean word attached to it. That woman, this woman, Victoria Halle. He did not move. He did not change his expression. He had not decided, in the 3-second window available to him, what to do with the recognition that had just fired through every nerve in his body. So he did nothing. He held the arrangement. He breathed through his nose. She looked at him with the casual assessment someone gives a delivery person present, mildly appreciative, already moving on. "Those are for the anteroom table," she said. Her voice was clear and even. "You can set them there." "Yes, ma'am." He crossed to the table. He set the arrangement down with the same careful precision he used for every delivery, adjusting the angle slightly so the tallest branch faced the room rather than the wall. He straightened. She had already half turned away, still reading her phone. He looked at her profile. "She doesn't know who I am." Of all the things he had imagined, and there had been a long dark season, years ago, when he had imagined many things, he had never quite fully accounted for this. That she would simply not recognize him. That he would be invisible to her. That the weight he had been carrying for 5 years would mean nothing, pass through her like light through glass. She did not look up as he left. The elevator doors closed. He stood inside them, alone, and looked at his own hands. He drove back across the city without going to Margaret's first. He went home. He went to the closet. He moved the boots aside and pulled the box out and set it on the kitchen table, and stood looking at it for a while before he opened it. The contents were exactly as he had left them. He didn't need to sort through everything, he knew what was there and where. But he picked things up and set them down again the way you do when you're reacquainting yourself with something you've been pretending doesn't exist. Emily's employment records. The performance reviews that had been, without exception, outstanding for 3 years running. A printout of the internal memo that had circulated after she was terminated, the one that described, in carefully chosen language, how a compliance irregularity had been identified and addressed. Her name appeared once in that memo, in a sentence that managed to imply guilt without directly stating it, which Daniel had come to understand was how certain kinds of institutional violence were administered, precisely with plausible deniability. The email chain was the heart of it. He spread the printed pages out in order. The chain showed Emily flagging a discrepancy and quarterly reporting a gap between what the company was presenting to its investors and what the internal data showed. She had sent it to her direct supervisor. Her supervisor had forwarded it up the chain with a note attached that Daniel, even now, found remarkable for its nakedness. "She's going to be a problem. Handle it." 3 weeks later, Emily was placed on administrative leave. 2 weeks after that, she was terminated for cause, the cause being a vague assertion of unauthorized access to restricted financial data, which was a phrase that could mean anything, and, in this instance, had been designed to mean whatever was most convenient. She had tried to fight it. So had he. They had found 2 attorneys willing to take the case. Both had withdrawn within 60 days, in each instance citing undisclosed conflicts. The third attorney had been willing but honest. The documentation is thin, the chain of custody is questionable, and they have resources you don't. Emily had not died immediately. That was what people sometimes seemed to assume when he tried to explain it. She had lived for 2 more years, but they were years in which she couldn't find work in her field, in which the stress had eroded her health in ways that were diffuse and hard to point to, the sleep that never came, the chest tightness that a doctor kept calling anxiety, the afternoon in November when she had been driving home from a grocery run and simply stopped being present in her body. A blood clot, the autopsy had said. Stress-related, the cardiologist had suggested, quietly, not in writing. Lily had been 4 years old. She remembered her mother as a smell, as a sensation, as a color. The way young children hold on to the dead. Daniel sat at the table and looked at the email chain. He had read it so many times he could have recited portions of it. But something felt different now. He was reading it with a different question in his mind. Victoria Hale had signed the termination order. He had always known that. The signature was there, clear, clean, the practiced signature of someone accustomed to signing things. But in his grief and his early rage, he had held her as the author of everything. The architect. The one who decided. He looked at the chain again. The instruction to handle it had not come from Victoria Hale. It had come from a name 2 levels below her. R. Chambers. He looked at that name for a long time. Then he went to pick up Lily. She was asleep in the fort at Margaret's house, one arm thrown over her face. He stood in the doorway of his sister's living room and looked at his daughter sleeping, and he thought about the question she had asked him 3 months ago, in that same plain, unguarded tone she used for everything. Did Mom do something wrong? He had told her no. He had told her that Mom had tried to do something right, and that sometimes when people tried to do right things, other people made it hard for them. Lily had accepted this with the seriousness she gave to most things, and had then asked if she could have cereal for dinner. But the question stayed with him. He picked her up carefully. She stirred, mumbled something, settled against his shoulder. "Bah," she said, still half asleep. "Yeah, Bug, I'm here. Fort's crooked," she said. "I know," he said. "We'll fix it another time." He began requesting assignments to the Harrington Tower route. The Bramble and Bloom dispatcher, a cheerful woman named Patrice, who had worked there for 11 years and knew every driver's preferences and limitations, noted the request without comment and adjusted his assignments accordingly. Daniel was reliable and didn't ask for things without reason. So she gave him the route. He made deliveries to Harrington Tower 3 times over the next 2 weeks. Standing orders for the lobby, fresh arrangements twice a week. A birthday delivery to an attorney's office on the 20th floor. A sympathy arrangement to a firm on 32 that had recently lost a senior partner. He learned the rhythms of the building. He learned which security guards were thorough and which were conversational and which were simply waiting out their shifts. He learned that the east elevator moved slightly faster than the west one, and that the service entrance on the building's north side was used primarily by catering and cleaning staff. He did not go back to the 41st floor during this time. He did not need to. He needed to see what moved around that floor from the outside. The building had a cafe on the ground level with east-facing windows. He ate lunch there twice, ordering the same coffee and the same turkey sandwich, sitting at a table where he could watch the elevator bank. He was not surveilling in any technical or dramatic sense. He had no equipment, no expertise, no plan that extended more than a few steps ahead. He was simply watching, the way he watched everything, which was quietly and without any obvious expression. He saw Victoria Hale twice in those 2 weeks. Once coming in at 7:40 in the morning, coffee in hand, phone pressed to her ear, moving through the lobby like someone who had long ago ceased to find lobbies interesting. Once leaving in the evening, later than most, the building's lights already dimmed on most floors, her pace slightly slower, her phone in her pocket rather than her hand. She was never alone. There was usually someone close. An assistant, a colleague, occasionally a group. But even in a group, she occupied a specific quality of space. People arranged themselves around her in small ways that they probably weren't conscious of. He also saw a man named, as far as he had been able to determine from the company's public directory, Robert Chambers. The company directory listed him as CFO. He was in his mid-50s, heavyset, with the particular air of someone who had mastered the politics of institutions without ever becoming the face of them. He was the kind of person who is easy to overlook. Daniel suspected this was deliberate. The R. Chambers from the email chain would be in his early 50s now. The math was right. The position was right. The fact that he was still there, still CFO, while Emily's name had been reduced to a compliance footnote, that fact sat in Daniel's chest, like a stone that had been there so long he'd stopped being surprised by its weight. He went home each evening and sat with Lily through dinner, through bath time, through the reading of whichever book she had selected. She was working through a series about a girl who solved mysteries with her dog, which she found deeply satisfying because the dog was always right in the end. "Dogs are really smart," she said, one evening, mid-chapter. "Some of them," Daniel said. "Are they smarter than people? At some things. Like what?" "Knowing when something's wrong," he said, after a moment. paying attention to what something actually is, instead of what it looks like. Lily considered this. Like how Henry knows when I'm sad even when I'm not crying. Henry was Margaret's dog. He was 15 pounds of indeterminate breed and absolute emotional accuracy. Yeah, Daniel said. Like that. She turned back to her book. On his fourth visit to the 41st floor, a resupply of the standing orchid arrangement that the account called for every 10 days, Victoria Hale was in the anteroom when he arrived. She was standing at the tall windows that faced the river, a coffee cup in her hand, and she turned when he stepped off the elevator. She watched him cross to the table and begin the careful process of swapping the old arrangement for the new. "You're always on time," she said. It wasn't a compliment, exactly. It was an observation. He recognized the difference. "Yes," he said. "Most of your colleagues come within a 30-minute window. You're always exactly on schedule." 30 minutes is enough time for an arrangement to be in the wrong place, he said. Meetings start. Phones ring. Things get moved. She looked at him. "Is that from experience?" From paying attention, she nodded slowly. He had the sense that she was filing him somewhere, categorizing him in a way that was more thorough than the category warranted. He had seen that same quality in Emily, the way she looked at a spreadsheet and heard something the numbers were trying to say between the lines. He finished the arrangement. He gathered the old flowers. "The ranunculus are losing their form," he said. "I'd suggest switching to a different variety for the next order if you want the same effect. The summer heat is affecting the supply chain. What would you suggest instead?" he thought. "White garden roses. They hold longer, and they have a similar density without looking forced." She tilted her head slightly. "Forced, when an arrangement looks like it's trying too hard," he said. A very small pause. "Fine," she said. "Make the change." He nodded and moved toward the elevator. He pressed the button and waited. "You look familiar," she said, behind him. He turned slightly. She was still looking at him, coffee cup lowered now. Her expression, the particular kind of neutral that people use when they're not sure what they're seeing. "I'm not sure from where," she added. "Not as an apology, as a fact. I've been doing this route for a few weeks," he said. "A beat." "Maybe that's it," she said, without conviction. The elevator opened. He stepped in. He stood in the elevator and breathed. The third time Lily came with him on a delivery day. Margaret was at a doctor's appointment. He had no other option, and Lily was, as always, better at being taken somewhere unexpected than most adults. He knew she sat in the lobby of Harrington Tower on a bench near the planters, while Daniel handled a ground-floor drop-off. Victoria Hale happened to be returning from lunch. Lily was reading the mystery book, legs swinging. Victoria walked past, slowed, looked at her with the particular curiosity adults sometimes have for children who are doing something more self-contained than children are expected to do. "Good book?" she asked. Lily looked up. She assessed Victoria with the same level gaze she gave most things. "The dog just figured out who stole the map," she said. "But I knew 20 pages ago." Victoria looked momentarily caught off guard. "How?" "Because the person who acted the most normal was acting too normal." Lily turned back to her book. "That's usually how." Victoria stood there for a second longer than the conversation required. Daniel returned from the elevator to find them in that arrangement, his daughter reading, this woman standing slightly too still, and he stopped. Victoria looked at him. Something shifted in her face, almost imperceptible. The familiarity she hadn't been able to place, rearranged now with a new element in the frame. "She's yours?" Victoria said. "Yes," Daniel said. Lily looked up at him. "Bah, she's smart. She understood the thing about the dog. I heard." He held out his hand for Lily. She closed her book and took it and slid off the bench. They walked toward the exit. Daniel did not look back. But at the door, Lily looked up at him and said, in that same matter-of-fact voice she used for everything, "Bah, you know her, don't you?" He pushed the door open. The city air came in, warm and full of diesel and river. "From somewhere," he said. Lily nodded, satisfied with this, and moved on. He spread everything on the kitchen table again that night. but this time with a different structure. He made a timeline on a legal pad, not of Emily's story, which he knew by heart, but of what had happened inside the company during the same period. He had gathered more information over the last 2 weeks than he'd had access to before, not through any breach through public records, earnings filings, archived news articles, a class action lawsuit that had been filed against the company 3 years ago by a group of shareholders and had been settled quietly, the terms sealed. 18 months later, the lawsuit had concerned accounting irregularities in a specific quarter, precisely the quarter that Emily had flagged in her internal complaint. He sat with that for a long time. In the documents he already possessed, there was an email from Emily to her supervisor with a digital timestamp of 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. He had always read this as the beginning of the chain, but in a document he hadn't focused on before, an internal IT log that had been included in her wrongful termination file. Almost as an afterthought, the same email appeared with a different timestamp, 11:23 a.m., the same day, the same email, 2 different times. He was not a forensic accountant. He was not a cybersecurity expert. He was a man who had spent 5 years being told that the chain of evidence wasn't clean enough, which meant that he had spent 5 years learning what clean enough required. The email had been modified after it was sent. The timestamp had been altered, which meant the version that had been used to justify Emily's termination, the one that placed her access to the restricted financial data before her flagging of the complaint, making it look like the complaint was a defensive move rather than a genuine report. That version was not the original. Someone had moved the time. He looked at the IT log header. The log was authored by a user whose credentials were assigned to the finance department's internal systems team. Finance reported to the CFO, Robert Chambers. Daniel did not move for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a call he had not made in 4 years. The attorney, the third one, the honest one, answered on the 5th ring, sounding like he had been asleep. His name was Gerald Fitch. He was semi-retired. He remembered the case. "I have something new," Daniel said. Silence on the line. "Tell me," Gerald said. He requested the next scheduled delivery to the 41st floor and arrived 8 minutes early, which was unusual for him. The anteroom was empty. He set up the arrangement, the white garden roses he had suggested, which were, he noticed with a distant professional satisfaction, exactly right for the space, and he was still there when Victoria came through the interior door. She stopped when she saw him, not from surprise exactly, more like confirmation of something she had half expected. "You're early," she said. "I need a few minutes," he said. "If you have them." She looked at him for a long beat. The quality of the silence in the room shifted slightly, not threatening, but honest, like a barometer reading. "All right," she said. She set her phone face down on the reception desk. She stood rather than sitting, which he respected. She was not making herself comfortable in a conversation she hadn't chosen. He kept his voice level. He had practiced this, not the words exactly, but the temperature. He was not here to punish. He was not here to perform anything. He had a question. "Do you remember the name Emily Hayes?" he said. The name moved across her face like light across still water, a ripple, then stillness. "Emily Hayes," she repeated. "She worked in financial analysis at your company. She was terminated in November of 2019 for cause." The cause was listed as unauthorized access to restricted data. Victoria was very still. "I remember the termination," she said slowly. I didn't know the details personally. She was my wife," Daniel said. The room held that sentence for a moment. He did not fill the silence. He had learned that the instinct to fill silence was something people used to protect themselves from what the silence meant. And he was not going to protect her from it. "I'm not here to threaten you," he continued. "I'm not here for money. I've spent 5 years trying to understand what actually happened to her, and I've recently found something that changes the shape of the story. I'm here because you signed the termination order, which means you were either part of what happened or you were used to finalize something you didn't design." He let that land. "I think," he said carefully, "it was the second one. But I'm not certain. And I need you to understand that I intend to find out." Victoria said nothing for a long moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a single folded page, a copy of the IT log with the 2 timestamps highlighted in yellow. He placed it on the desk between them. She looked at it. He watched her eyes move across the page. "What is this?" she said, though she said it in a way that suggested she already understood what it was. "A record of when an email was modified," he said. The email that established the timeline used to justify Emily's termination. The modification moved the timestamp by approximately 97 minutes, which moved her from whistleblower to perpetrator. Silence. "The credentials used for the modification," he said, "belong to your finance IT team, which reports to your CFO." She looked up at him. He folded his hands loosely in front of him. His voice, when he continued, was entirely without drama. It was simply what he had to say. "I don't need your apology," he said. "I need the truth. My daughter is 6 years old. She asks me, sometimes, whether her mother did something wrong. Right now, I can tell her no, but I can't tell her why no. I can't show her anything. I want to be able to show her something when she's old enough to understand it." He picked up the document. He returned it to his pocket. "I wanted you to know," he said simply. "What you do with that is up to you." He turned and pressed the elevator button. "Wait," she said. He waited. Her voice, when she spoke again, was not soft. It was not broken. It was the voice of someone thinking at high speed through something that had just reorganized itself completely. "I'll need to see everything you have," she said. He looked back at her. "I'll bring it," he said. She moved fast, and she moved quietly, which was how Daniel understood that she had reached the same conclusion he had, that when something like this begins to surface, the people responsible begin to prepare, and preparation takes time that truth does not have. She did not come to him for the documents. She sent a legal representative, a woman named Claire Hartwell, who was clearly her personal attorney rather than company counsel, which was a meaningful distinction. Daniel provided copies of everything he had. Gerald Fitch attended the meeting as his own representation. The 2 attorneys communicated in the careful, lateral language of people who are trying to reach the same destination from different roads. The investigation was internal, which meant it was fast. Victoria had access to the full archive of the company's digital systems, and with the timestamp discrepancy as a specific entry point, the forensic accountants she retained were able to pull the thread with precision. What the thread held, when pulled completely loose, was this. Robert Chambers had been covering a financial reporting irregularity for at least 2 years before Emily flagged it. The irregularity itself was not catastrophic. It was the kind of thing that became catastrophic only if disclosed at the wrong moment, during a period when the company was in acquisition talks and its valuation was under scrutiny. Chambers had managed the numbers carefully. But Emily, doing her job with the thoroughness that her performance reviews had always praised, had found the gap. He had not acted alone. There were 2 others in the finance team who had participated in the active concealment, but Chambers had driven it, and Chambers had engineered Emily's removal. He had prepared the termination documentation. He had flagged it to Victoria's office as a routine personnel matter requiring executive sign-off. Victoria's assistant had routed it through with a batch of other documents during a week in which Victoria had been managing a hostile acquisition defense and, by her own account, had signed several documents without reading them with the attention she should have given them. That was the shape of it. Victoria had not ordered Emily's destruction. She had, with a careless signature on a document she hadn't read carefully enough, ratified it. The distinction was real. It was also insufficient. She appeared to understand both things. The board meeting was a closed session, which meant Daniel was not in the room. He did not need to be. Gerald called him afterward. "It's done," Gerald said. "Chambers? Resigned, effective immediately. The board is preparing a referral for the State Attorney General's office. They'll likely pursue the others as well. And the shareholders? The settlement from 3 years ago may be revisited, depending on what the AG finds. That's outside our direct involvement." A pause. "Daniel," Gerald said. "Emily's file is being formally cleared. The company is issuing a statement, limited, legal language, but it's there. It acknowledges that the basis for her termination was improperly established and that the record reflects no professional wrongdoing on her part. Daniel sat in his van in the Bramble and Bloom lot. The radio was off, as always. Outside the windshield, the afternoon light was doing that particular thing it did in summer, thick and golden, and indifferent to everything beneath it. He said, "Okay." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "Is that enough?" "It's the truth," Daniel said. "That's enough." He sat in the van for a while after hanging up. He did not cry. He had cried for Emily in the early years, in ways he hadn't let anyone see except Margaret, who had sat beside him on her kitchen floor at 2 in the morning and not said anything, which was the correct thing to do. She had understood, with the particular intelligence of someone who had known both of them long before they had known each other, that certain griefs have no geometry you can talk around. You just sit inside them until they become a shape you can live with. He had grieved Emily completely, in the way that love demands grief be done without shortcuts, without anesthesia. What he felt now was not grief. It was something older and quieter than grief. The settling of something that had been suspended for a long time. He thought about the box with the torn lid. He thought about what he would do with it. Victoria came to find him on a Wednesday. Not to the flower shop, not through an intermediary. She looked up the route schedule, he didn't know how, but she was someone who could find things when she decided to look for them, and she was outside Harrington Tower at 8 in the morning when his van pulled to the curb for the lobby delivery. He saw her when he got out. She was standing off to the side of the entrance, not in the path of foot traffic. She was in a coat rather than a blazer. She looked like someone who had slept less than usual. "I thought this might be easier out here," she said. He gathered the arrangement from the van. "Come in while I drop this, then we can talk." She followed him into the lobby. She waited while he set the arrangement at the reception desk and signed the log. The lobby staff did not appear to know what to do with Victoria Hale, standing in the lobby at 8 in the morning like a person waiting rather than arriving. And so they did nothing, which was the professional choice. They stepped back outside. The morning was overcast, the river visible at the end of the block, its surface the color of pewter. "I'm not going to tell you I didn't know," she said. "What I've come to say isn't that." He waited. "I signed the document. I signed it without reading it the way I should have read it. And a woman's career was destroyed, and then her health was destroyed, and then she died, and her daughter grew up without her. Those are connected events. My signature is part of the connection." She looked at him directly when she said it. He found this harder to receive than he had expected, not because it wasn't true, but because it was. "What I'm doing about it," she continued, "is this. The public statement will go further than the legal minimum. We're issuing a full accounting Emily's name, her work, what she found, and what was done in response. Not buried in a press release, properly documented." She reached into the inside pocket of her coat and removed an envelope. She held it out. "There's also a fund," she said. "We're calling it the Emily Hayes Professional Integrity Award. It's endowed 5 years of funding for financial analysts and auditors in the industry who identify and report internal irregularities through proper channels." He didn't take the envelope immediately. "I didn't do this to name things after her," he said. "I know," Victoria said. "But I looked at the record of who she was. I read her performance reviews. I read the complaint she filed, the original, not the modified version. She was precise, and she was careful, and she was right, and she knew what reporting it might cost her, and she reported it anyway." A pause. "The award is appropriate. It's not pity, it's acknowledgement." He took the envelope. He didn't open it. "My daughter asked me once," he said, "whether her mother did something wrong." He looked toward the river. "I told her no. But I couldn't prove it to her, not in a way that would last past her not asking anymore." Victoria was quiet. "Now I can," he said. He folded the envelope and put it in his jacket pocket. "I don't forgive you," he said. Not harshly, as a fact, the way Lily stated things. "But I understand the difference between what you did and what Chambers did. And I understand that understanding that difference doesn't clear what you did. Both things are true. Victoria nodded. Just once. I know, she said. He looked at her for a moment, this woman who had occupied so much of his internal landscape for 5 years, who had been the architect of his worst period of life in the version of events he had carried longest, and who had turned out to be something more complicated and less satisfying than a clear villain. He thought about Lily saying that the most normal acting person was usually the one to watch. He thought about how wrong that was. In this case, how the person most camouflaged had not been Victoria at all. Goodbye, he said. He got in the van. That evening, after dinner, after the bath, after the reading of 3 chapters in which the dog solved the case with a level of competence that Lily clearly found deeply affirming, he sat on the edge of her bed. Hey, Bug, he said. She was already half in sleep territory. The way she went fast, clean, like stepping off a ledge. I have something to tell you. Not tonight. When you're ready. Maybe when you're a little older. She cracked one eye. About Mom? About what Mom did. What she found. Why it mattered. The eye closed. Okay, she said. The word soft and blurred at the edges. She was right, he said. And now there's proof of it. That's all. Lily was quiet for a moment. He thought she had fallen asleep. Then, very quietly, I knew she wasn't wrong. He sat with that for a while. He kissed her forehead. He turned off the light. He still drives the same route. The van is the same van, though the rear passenger side door now sticks slightly and has to be lifted when you close it, which Patrice has been meaning to log with maintenance for 3 months and hasn't yet. Lily calls this the van's personality, which is the kind of thing she says that makes him pull over sometimes and just sit for a second. He still delivers to Harrington Tower. Not weekly, the Orchid arrangement moved to a bi-monthly schedule after a procurement change in the building's management, but he is still on the route, and he still takes the east elevator, and he still sets the arrangements with the tallest branch facing the room. He ran into Victoria Hale once in the lobby, a few weeks after their conversation outside. She was talking to someone, in motion, as she always was. She looked at him and gave a slight nod. He returned it. The transaction was complete and correct, and said exactly what was necessary, and nothing more. He opened the box with the torn lid on a Sunday afternoon while Lily was at Margaret's. He went through it methodically. He kept the things that constituted the formal record, the original emails, the IT logs, the attorney briefs. These were Emily's, in the way that certain documents belong to a person even after they're gone. He kept the photograph that had been paperclipped to the inside of the lid. Emily at a conference, mid-sentence, making a point about something to someone off-frame. She had her hand raised slightly, one finger out, the gesture of a person who has done the math and is about to explain the answer. She looked like herself. She looked completely like herself. The rest he packed into a bag and set beside the door for recycling. He sat on the edge of the bed for a while after. He thought about what it meant to carry something for 5 years and then put it down. People talked about this in terms of relief, of lightness. He didn't feel light exactly. He felt something more like adjusted, like a person who has been compensating for an imbalance for so long that standing straight requires a new kind of attention. He picked up the photograph. He took it to the living room and put it on the shelf beside Lily's books, where there was a small space between a ceramic owl and a library copy of the Dog Mystery series. He adjusted it twice. He stepped back and looked at it. Emily mid-sentence. Making a point. Correct. That night, Lily saw it when she came home. She walked past, stopped, walked back. She stood in front of the shelf for a long time. That's Mom, she said. Yeah. She looks like she's talking. She usually was, he said. Lily studied the photo with the same focused attention she gave to her books. Then she reached up and touched the frame very lightly, with 2 fingers, the way you touch something you want to make sure is real. She looks like she was right about something, Lily said. Daniel looked at his daughter. She was, he said. Lily nodded, satisfied. She picked up her book from the coffee table. She settled on the couch. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the shelf. The photograph. The owl. The borrowed mysteries about a dog who always knew. He started dinner. The truth hadn't brought Emily back. That was the part no one wanted to say plainly, because saying it plainly made it hard to argue that the truth had been worth pursuing. But the truth had not been for Emily, not ultimately. The dead don't need justice. They don't need anything. They are finished. The truth was for Lily, so that one day, when she was old enough to carry the weight of it, when she could hold both the loss and the record, the grief and the proof, she would know that her mother had looked at something broken in the world and had named it correctly and had not looked away. And she would know that naming a broken thing correctly, even when it costs you everything, is not a mistake. It is the opposite of a mistake. It is the only response to the world that does not, in some quiet way, participate in what is wrong with it. That was what Emily had been. That was what Lily came from. Daniel Hayes set the water to boil. Outside the window, the city went on with its ordinary indifference: traffic on the bridge, pigeons on the overpass, a woman arguing quietly with her phone in the doorway of the laundromat across the street. None of it new. None of it had ever known. The world had continued, unmarked, through Emily's career and her discovery, and her silencing and her death, and Lily's 4-year-old grief, and his 5 years of carrying a box with a torn lid, and the long quiet work of finding the thread and pulling it until the whole false structure gave way. The world had continued, and would continue, and this was not a cruelty. It was simply the condition. You did your small, precise work inside it, and you hoped the work was true. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the truth held. Traffic on the bridge. The river catching the last of the evening light. A white cargo van moving through the streets below, carrying flowers for people who were still alive and still wanting to say things to each other. I love you. I'm sorry. Congratulations. You are not alone, and the man who delivered those things walking, finally, a little lighter than he had before. Not because the weight was gone, because he knew, at last, exactly what he had been carrying.